Our first reading is from Matthew chapter 5, verses 1 to 12. Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went out on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you." And our second reading is Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 to 12. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood. And have you completely forgotten this word of encouragement that addresses you as a father addresses his son? It says, "My son, do not make light of the Lord's discipline, and do not lose heart when he rebukes you, because the Lord disciplines the one he loves, and he chastens every one he accepts as his son." Endure hardship as discipline. God is treating you as his children. For what children are not disciplined by their father? If you are not disciplined, and everyone undergoes discipline, then you are not legitimate, not true sons and daughters at all. Moreover, we have all had human fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them for it. How much more should we submit to the Father of spirits and live? They disciplined us for a little while as they thought best, but God disciplines us for our good in order that we may share in his holiness. No discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace for those who've been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen your feeble arms and weak knees. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thanks for reading that. Good morning, everyone. I'll just pray before we begin and then we'll dive in. Yeah, Father, I thank you for your word. I thank you for the Beatitudes and the wonderful wisdom that they give us. And yeah, Lord, I thank you for your words that both challenge and comfort us. So I pray that you would speak to us this morning. Lord, we want to meet with you. So have your way. May your word be a light for our path this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. So I thought to start off with, so if this sermon has a title, I think it would be The Hidden Treasures of the Kingdom. And so some of you may know, but we as a House of Prayer had the joy a few weeks ago of going to Vienna. And getting there was actually a little bit chaotic. So there's a moment when flights were cancelled, and there was also another moment when, in the midst of this, so Kath, another member of our team, her wallet went missing. And quite naturally, she was worried about this and went to security to look for it. And then, guess what? After about an hour or so, we found it. And guess where it was? Was it at security? Somewhere else in the airport? Well, actually, what happened was, in the midst of this, I suddenly stand up and realized to my surprise, oh, there's a wallet on my chair. And it turned out that all this time, I'd been sitting on it all along, and I had no idea. I have no idea how it got there. I have no idea how I didn't realize. Oops. But I guess it was good that we found it. But I felt very bad that we had to go through that worry. But I wonder if that's true as well as we follow Jesus, that so often the treasure of the kingdom and the treasures of following him are often hidden. And so often at the world we can search for treasure, success, blessing in the high up places, maybe in the results, in the glamour, in the prestige, in the applause. But what if that isn't where it is at all? What if actually the blessings and the treasures that we search for are actually hidden? What if maybe like that wallet, we're sitting on it all along because it isn't found in the places that we imagine, but rather in the things that perhaps we rather hide, our weakness, our brokenness, our frailty, our pain, our vulnerability, poverty of spirit. What if that's where the blessing is hidden? What if the blessing isn't what the world perhaps calls a blessing? Because after all, it's an upside-down kingdom with vision and values that appear contradictory to this world. And I think we see that in the heart of the Beatitudes. So first we're going to look at the hidden blessing. Because the Beatitudes literally means blessings. And we can see that, can't we? Blessed are, blessed are, blessed are. And blessed is the Greek word for happy. But I think it's actually deeper than that. It's not just I'm happy because I had a dairy milk bar of chocolate, or I'm happy because I had my morning coffee. But actually it's a deeper than that. It's a deeper joy, a joy that whose secret is contained within itself. And I was really struck as well reading it, that it's blessed are. This is kind of obvious, I think, but I never really realised it's not just a future blessing, it's not a future hope, but actually it's a blessing in the here and now. But I wonder if we can imagine ourselves on that mountain as Jesus begins the Sermon on the Mount, if we're there listening to him. Can we imagine what he's going to say? What would we be expecting as Jesus begins this revolutionary preach? I wonder what were perhaps the Jews wanting to hear. What were they expecting? And what would we imagine if Jesus was perhaps preaching this sermon today in our culture? What even does our culture preach? I can almost imagine that culture would perhaps say, well, blessed are those who have it together. Or blessed are those who are happy all the time. Or blessed are those who are determined and zealous. Or blessed are those who are satisfied and are never in want. Or blessed are the cautious and strategic. Or perhaps blessed are those who are guarded. Or blessed are the activists. Or blessed are the popular. Or blessed are those who everyone applauds. But is that what Jesus says? Well, no, we heard it read to us, didn't he? Rather, he begins his revolutionary speech with, blessed are the poor in spirit. Like, is Jesus being serious? That this first beatitude is almost like the foundation behind all of what he's going to say. It's almost like the cornerstone of all that is to come. It's like Jesus saying actually the qualification, what qualifies us isn't actually about being spiritual enough, but actually being spiritually poor enough to need him and want him. What a belief that it's actually in our weakness that we actually yield into his strength. That is in our spiritual poverty that actually leads us to the riches that can only be found in Jesus' righteousness. It's in that place that we realize we are poor, we are broken. We realize that we need him. It's in our spiritual poverty when we get to the end of our rope that we actually get to the beginning of all that he is. And then again, Jesus goes on, blessed are those who mourn. Like, Isn't that crazy that he's saying mourning is actually a good thing? In a pain adverse generation where being happy is seen as the ultimate goal, there's actually a blessing to be found in lament, in grief, in mourning. And then Jesus goes on to say, blessed are the meek. Like, hang on, is meekness not a weakness? Surely it's good to be set on what we want and to be determined and zealous, but being meek, being gentle, not forcing our way, being humble enough to trust God to do it, that's actually a blessing in that. That we don't have to prove ourselves in a competitive world where we no longer have to fight our way to the top. How is there a blessing in that? And then Jesus goes on, blessed are those who hunger and thirst. Like he's saying it's good to be in need, to have that sense of urgent, desperate need, that longing that we cannot ignore, a desire so great that it cannot be just pushed down. In a consumerist generation where media is constantly trying to appease our desires and then to entertain us with pleasures, where instant satisfaction and pleasure are often portrayed as the ultimate goal, Jesus is saying that it's good to be hungry and thirsty. And then he goes on, blessed are the merciful. Like, what is Jesus saying? Like, is it not wise to be guarded, to be constrained, perhaps strategic of how best we spend our energy and time? Because after all, we live in a world of scarcity, don't we? Does being merciful not make us pushovers? Like, Jesus is saying it's good to be vulnerable, to open ourselves up to betrayal and hurt. Like, we're meant to enter into the suffering of the world, into a broken world. And actually, it's best for us not to just mind our own business or to keep ourselves to ourselves. Like, it's good to be merciful. And then Jesus goes on, it's blessed are the poor in heart. It's good to have an open transparency, to be single-minded, not having a merely impressive outer life, but having an inner life that matches up. But does that not mean we'll miss out? And then blessed are the peacemakers. That's particularly poignant today, isn't it, on Remembrance Sunday, as we honour and remember those who are so faithfully and sacrificially given their lives for the sake of peace. But again, that's costly. Will that not mean we're misunderstood? That active work of reconciliation. Is Jesus really saying that the depth of relationship is actually more important than proving that we're right? When blessed are those who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, perhaps this is the hardest, because often our highest priority is to live life of ease and to be liked by everyone. And that's what we go after, isn't it? And even so politely that perhaps we never offend anyone. But here Jesus is saying that there's a blessing to be found in our weakness, in vulnerability, in our childlikeness. That perhaps the things we hide and run away from, the brokenness that perhaps we'd rather hide behind, that's actually where perhaps we can find the blessing. And it's almost like Jesus is from another planet as he's saying this. And I guess in some ways he is, because he's from the kingdom of heaven. So why are these blessings? So I wonder, what is the reward that is hidden in the heart of these Beatitudes? What is the hidden reward? Another way of phrasing it, perhaps, what's the yearning and longing behind these? Perhaps maybe you could think of our own lives. What's the reason that you would wake up each morning? What's the thing that perhaps you would die for? Is it to be seen? Is it to be liked? Is it to be successful? Is it to get results? To be influential? And I've recently been reminded how just because we've been successful, it doesn't necessarily mean we've been faithful. And also, just because we haven't necessarily felt successful, it doesn't mean you haven't been faithful. And I think there's a lot of you in this room that have been really faithful, and perhaps it hasn't felt like that just because it hasn't looked like success. And Jesus wants to say, well done, good and faithful servant. Because what if the reward isn't results? What if it isn't recognition? What if it isn't popularity, the reward that the world would hunt after? What if it's actually something much more secure and eternal? Why are the Beatitudes blessings? Because they lead us to more of Jesus. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It's in our poverty of spirit that leads us to the riches of the kingdom of heaven where Jesus is King. It's in our frailty and fragility that truly lead us to the kingdom of heaven that will not fade. But blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. It's actually in our mourning, in our grief, in our sorrow and our lament that we can actually enter into comfort, the comfort of knowing the man of sorrows with us, the son of suffering that weeps with us. As the Message translation says, and I love this, it says we get embraced by the one who is most dear to us. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land. It's in our meekness that we actually inherit the promised land of his promises and grace, the land of freedom we could never earn by our own striving, that we could never earn or achieve, but only what his perfect love and faithfulness and righteousness could win for us. It's not by striving that we enter in, but actually through surrender. And blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. It's in that place of intense, desperate longing and yearning, that hungering and thirsting for righteousness, that ironically we actually get filled and satisfied. It's almost ironic, isn't it, being dissatisfied enough with the world and temporary riches, that actually it's only in that place of dissatisfaction that we can ultimately reach towards that heavenly reward and eternal satisfaction that can only be found in Jesus. I wonder if almost God has to keep us longing, keep us hungering, so that we don't settle. I wonder if it's almost this perpetual hunger and thirst. It's meant to be perpetual so that we keep on coming back to him. So we keep on coming back to the bread of life, keep on coming back to the living water, Jesus, the author of life himself. But blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Again, what is the hidden reward? It's in that place of being merciful, being moved and stirred and immersed, and being moved and stirred enough to immerse ourselves in the brokenness and suffering of the world, that we discover in a whole new way the mercy of Jesus, the one who stoops down to wash our feet, of all those who are downtrodden and defeated by life. It's in the margins that we truly discover the depths of the mercy of the one who became marginalized in a merciless world. And it's there also that we discover that we're just as much in need of mercy as anyone else. It's a level playing field, that we're just as much in need, that we're just as much poor in spirit as anyone else. It's in the suffering of the world that we really get to know Jesus in his suffering, that we discover his mercy afresh. Then blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. It's in that place of being peacemakers, those who count the cost of a reconciliation, of being bridge builders. However unpopular and misunderstood perhaps it will make us. And we see today, and we're on Sunday, that it's costly. But it's there that we truly discover our identity, the unshakable identity of acceptance of being children of God, of knowing who we are. That it doesn't come from people's applause or people's or what people say of us or popularity. That can only come from knowing who we are, because we know whose we are. And blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. It's as we have pure hearts, as we align our inner lives with our outer lives, having undivided, a single-minded devotion and affection for Jesus, that we actually get to see God. Wow. Who wants to see God? Who wants to see God all around us? Because the more we cultivate that attentiveness to him in the inner places, the more we'll notice him in the external places, the more we'll begin to see him all around us, perhaps in our workplaces, in our communities, out in the streets. Then blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. That's a hard one, isn't it? That even in the midst of persecution and being assaulted, that's where we truly realize that the reward of knowing Jesus and his suffering is far greater. And there's that exhortation to rejoice, for great is our reward. This hidden reward of knowing Jesus, of intimacy with him. And I was recently at a gathering, and a guy who spoke there was, I don't know if some of you may have heard about the outpouring of the Spirit that happened recently at a university in America in Asbury. Basically, there was this guy called Zach, and it was a compulsory chapel that they have each week, very ordinary, and he preached at this chapel, and he actually thought it went terribly, was about to go home, but students just started to linger in this place, and there's a real sense of conviction, a real sense of confession, a real sense of holiness, and basically it ended up being 16 days of non-stop prayer and worship of students just hungry for the presence of God. And what really struck me as this guy was speaking at this gathering I was at, Zach was saying, but that's not the reward. The reward isn't revival. Like, here's someone who's seen an outpouring of the Spirit literally in front of his very eyes. But he's saying that's not the reward. Because nothing beats friendship with Jesus. The reward isn't revival. It's friendship with Jesus. That's our very great reward. That's where the prize is. And that's what we see in the heart of the Beatitudes, that the hidden reward is Him. They're all blessings, these hidden blessings in the unlikely places, because they lead us to Him. And again, we see that in the passage that we read from Hebrews. Yet as one with perseverance, the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith. The prize is Him. He's the goal. He's the way and destination. As we acknowledge our own weakness and poverty of spirit, our mourning, our brokenness, our vulnerability, there's this beautiful moment that we realize that we're blessed beyond measure. Because as we bring it before Jesus, we realize that He doesn't turn His face away. There's a hidden blessing in our brokenness as it's there that we discover this gospel of grace that is big enough to handle the weight of all our brokenness, that leads us into deeper dependence and trust. It's deeper intimacy and friendship with Jesus. It's in that place that we realize we're way more broken than we could ever imagine, but also way more loved than we could ever dream. And that's where we find the hidden reward of friendship with Jesus. And then finally, hidden encouragement. What's the hidden encouragement? Because the Beatitudes, as wonderful as they are and as easy as they are to speak out loud, they're hard way to give out. They're not comfortable. They disturb our comfort and complacency. They're both comforting and challenging. They shake up our perspective, right, of what giving is all about. They feel counterintuitive because it's a narrow path. They won't make us popular, will they? Even that with the Beatitudes. But I wonder if there's a hidden encouragement as we walk this path. That even when it feels lonely, that actually we're not alone. And I'm reminded of the words of Hebrews again. Since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, yet us throw off everything that hinders. We're not alone, because we walk in the footsteps of those who have gone before us. And again, particularly poignant today and one Sundays, remember those who've given their lives for that hope of peace that we walk in today. We're part of a much bigger story. We get to live in a story that outlives us. If we feel alone, discouraged, I wonder if it maybe be helpful to imagine that great cloud of witnesses. Maybe imagine running that race. Maybe, I almost imagine that the London Marathon. Imagine if you're running that and the streets are lined with people cheering you on, encouraging us not to give up, for He is worth it all. And then there's this exhortation to consider Him, consider Jesus, so you will not grow weary and lose heart. Our great encouragement is ultimately Jesus is Him. That there's nothing we can go through that He hasn't already been through, because He's the pioneer and perfecter that's gone before us. He's our great forerunner, the one who perfectly lived out with the Beatitudes, who went through the betrayal, who went through the isolation, who went through the most agonizing death for the sake of us. We get to follow in His footsteps. And I love that exhortation for the joy set before Him. He endured the scorn of the cross. Because I'm reminded that there's a coming joy. There's a joy and glory that surpasses it all, the joy of sharing in His holiness. And again, the Hebrews passage talks about discipline, which is hard, isn't it? None of us like discipline. Maybe even in the Beatitudes feels a bit like discipline. But God disciplines us for our good, that we may share in his holiness. It produces a harvest of righteousness and peace that leads us into greater life and freedom. It's costly, but it's priceless. And maybe the discipline feels like refinement. Maybe we feel like we're in the refiner's fire, but there's purpose in it. God knows what is needed. He knows exactly how long we're meant to be in the fire, and he's holding us there. So maybe the hidden encouragement, however uncomfortable it feels, it's about, yes, where we are right now, or how we feel right now, but about who we are becoming. That we get to become more like Jesus, that we get to share in his holiness, spurred on by ultimately him as our forerunner, but also by that great cloud of witnesses cheering us on. So in conclusion, the hidden kingdom. The glory and beauty of the kingdom is found in unlikely places, right? It's found in hidden places. And I was reminded of how it's like that treasure that Jesus talks about, this man that finds this treasure hidden in a field and then sells everything to buy this land to get that treasure. I wonder if that's a bit like the treasures of the hidden kingdom, of the hidden blessings that we find in unlikely places, our weakness and brokenness, that hidden reward of knowing Jesus in his suffering, of knowing friendship with him, and the hidden encouragement of those who have gone before us, who are spurring us on, cheering us on, and ultimately Jesus, our forerunner, who for the joy set before him endured the scorn of the cross. It's all about him. It's all about Jesus. He's the treasure. He's the one that we fix our eyes on. Amen.